A young woman becomes the therapist of a broken man. In healing him, she starts to fall, but he was never truly hers. After a painful betrayal, she disappears only to return years later as someone unrecognizable. I still remember the first time I met Kieran Hale. My hands were ice cold that day, not because of the weather, but because of the email I had just read. Please accept Kieran Hale into your private therapy sessions. Urgent case. Multiple rejections. Highly confidential. Kieran Hale. Billionaire tech tycoon. The one with a godlike face and a heart that tabloids said didn't exist. When he walked into my office, he didn't even look at me. Just sat, crossed his legs, and stared at the window. You have 45 minutes, he said. Make it count. I smiled gently, setting down my tea. Then let's not waste time pretending you don't need help. That got his attention. He turned, slowly, raising a brow. Interesting. What is that you think I need help? I held his gaze. You're here. That's reason enough. And that was how it began. I had no idea I was walking into the eye of a storm. I had no idea that someday he'd ruin me by thanking me for healing him just so he could love someone else. The first 3 sessions were a dance, not one of harmony, but of avoidance. Kieran would sit in the same chair, arms folded, a carefully rehearsed calm on his face. And every time I asked a question that got too close to his wounds, he'd deflect with charm or sarcasm. You don't believe in emotions, I once asked. He chuckled. I believe they're for the weak or the broke. I didn't flinch. Interesting. Because the most emotionless people I know are often those who were once hurt the deepest. For a moment his jaw tensed. Just slightly. I had hit something. A fragment. A fracture. But he looked away, back to the skyline outside my office window, and muttered, then maybe I was once very weak. That was the first honest thing he ever said to me. Over the next few weeks, cracks began to show. Kieran never talked about his childhood, but he always arrived exactly 2 minutes late. Always with a black coffee, no sugar. Always dressed like he had just stepped out of a GQ cover shoot, but with eyes that looked like they hadn't seen sleep in years. I have dreams, he once confessed. I glanced up from my notepad. About what? About drowning. But not in water. In people's expectations. In guilt. In her. I didn't press. I knew the best way to invite a story was to let the silence do the asking. He ran a hand through his dark hair, looked right at me for once, and whispered I wasn't enough for her. No matter how much I tried. Her, the elusive woman behind his silence. The ghost that still clung to him. Do you want to talk about her? No, but then he did. Her name was Amra Wells, a ballet dancer. The kind who spun through his world like a whirlwind and vanished just as quickly. She left without a goodbye, he said, voice barely a whisper. No note, no closure, just gone. And I broke. For the first time, I saw something raw in his eyes, not the calculated confidence he wore like armor, but a shattered boy beneath the man. Did you love her? I asked softly. I don't know what love is, he said. But I would burn cities for her. Is that love? I paused, then said, sometimes love isn't about what you'd burn. It's about what you'd rebuild. He looked at me, like he didn't expect that answer. Like no one had ever dared say something like that to him. That night, after he left, I sat in my office long after dark, and I realized I was beginning to care too much. A therapist should never fall for a patient. We're trained to listen, to support, to detach, but I was already slipping, Every story he told, every glimpse into his pain felt like he was handing me broken glass, piece by piece. And instead of shielding myself, I held them close, hoping I could arrange them into something whole again. What I didn't know was that this wasn't a puzzle to fix. It was a countdown to heartbreak. There's something dangerous about routine, how it becomes comforting before you realize you're entangled in it. Kieran's Monday sessions turned into Monday and Thursday. Then, a message later on a Saturday night. Can we talk? I don't know who else to call. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. Where are you? I asked. He was outside my apartment. I stepped into the hallway, heart pounding, barefoot and unready. He stood there, suit wrinkled, tie gone, and eyes bloodshot. I didn't know where else to go, he said quietly. I let him in, just for an hour, just to listen, just to help. That's what I told myself. That night, he sat on my couch with his elbows on his knees, looking like a man crumbling under weight no one else could see. Do you ever feel like you're not really living? He asked. Sometimes, I whispered, like you're performing your own life. But deep down, you're hollow. I nodded. Yes. He looked at me, then really looked, and something in the air changed. You get it, he said. No one ever gets it. That moment was the beginning of the fall. Over the next few weeks, our conversations became more than sessions. They became confessions. He told me about his mother, who left when he was 6, about his father, who built empires but never looked him in the eye, about the woman Amra who danced through his walls like she belonged there, and then disappeared without notice. I think I would've married her, he said once. But you didn't. She said, I didn't know how to love, that I only knew how to possess. I didn't respond, because I saw it too, that craving to own everything he feared losing, that hunger to control anything that reminded him of abandonment. Then, one rainy afternoon, I made the worst mistake a therapist could make. I touched his hand, just lightly. Just a brush, a human instinct. His voice had cracked while recalling a memory, his mother's perfume, the silence in the kitchen after she left, and he had looked so small, so lost, that my fingers moved before my mind could stop them. His eyes snapped to mine, and then he kissed me. It wasn't soft or slow. It was desperate, like a man clinging to a ledge, and I let him. The kiss haunted me. I replayed it 100 times, searching for justification, an excuse, a reason. I knew what the textbooks would say, what my professors would say, what I should say, but when he sent me a message the next day that simply said, I can't stop thinking about it, about you, I didn't report it. I didn't pull away. I replied, neither can I. We began seeing each other outside the office, once in the park, just walking, talking like old friends. Another time in a bookstore, where he picked out poetry and read it aloud in a voice that made me forget everything. He told me he hadn't felt this way in years, that I was helping him become someone new, and for a moment, I believed I was special, that I wasn't just his therapist, that I wasn't just the fixer. I was the one he was choosing, and maybe, just maybe, he was falling in love with me too. What I didn't know was that love, real love, can't be built on rescue missions, that sometimes, when someone lets you heal them, it's not because they want you, it's because they want to be whole again. For someone else, the night it happened, the city was hushed in rain. Not a soft drizzle, but a heavy, cleansing storm, the kind that makes you feel like something's ending, or just beginning. Kieran had invited me to his penthouse, No therapy tonight, he said. Just dinner. Just us. My brain screamed caution. But my heart, reckless, naive, desperate, overruled it. I told myself this was no longer a patient-client relationship. I told myself we had crossed that line weeks ago, and so I went. His place was modern, sharp-edged, and quiet. Too quiet. He greeted me at the door with no tie, sleeves rolled, barefoot, like he wanted to feel something real. You look. He hesitated, then smiled softly, like something I don't deserve. The way he said it disarmed me. We ate in silence at first. Pasta he ordered in, wine he poured carefully. The lights were dimmed, city skyline glowing in the windows. Then he said it, out of nowhere. Liana, I think I'm falling in love with you. I stopped breathing. I know it's wrong. I know it's messy. But when I'm with you, I feel peace. I haven't felt that since before everything went to hell. My throat tightened. Since Amara? He flinched at her name. Yes. But this isn't about her anymore. I'm not thinking about her when I'm with you. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. I said nothing. I just looked at him, and then he kissed me again, this time softer, slower, a kiss that felt like an apology for all the silence he'd ever given me, and I let myself fall. That night, I stayed. We didn't sleep together. We just lay there, two broken people tangled in silence, in secrets, in maybe. He held my hand under the sheets like it was the most fragile thing in the world. Do you believe in fate? He asked in the dark. Sometimes, I said, but not always kindly. He laughed, just once. Then maybe this is cruel fate, the kind that makes you wait years for peace, and then hands it to you with a warning label. What warning? That I don't know how to be loved. Not really. Not yet. I kissed his forehead and whispered, then I'll teach you. That was my mistake. In the days that followed, everything blurred. I wasn't just his therapist. I was his person. He started sending me quotes in the morning. Thought of you. He'd call when he was anxious. Your voice calms me. He began trusting people again, delegating, breathing. You make me better, he told me. And I believed that was love. Then one day, I noticed the messages slowed. He cancelled a dinner. Didn't reply to a good morning. My gut twisted. But I didn't want to seem clingy. I convinced myself he was just busy. But then it happened. A photo, sent by a friend. It was blurry. Taken from across a CAF, but it was unmistakable. Kieran. With her, Amara, her hand on his eyes on hers, and just like that, I realized what I had been. The rehab center. The in-between. The emotional crutch. I wasn't the destination. I was the bridge to get him back to the woman who'd once left him shattered. I didn't cry at first. I stared at the photo so long. My eyes burned, but not a single tear fell. Denial is a powerful thing. It wraps itself around pain like gauze, softens it, makes it almost bearable, but eventually, the gauze unravels and the truth bleeds through. I messaged him, not accusingly, just a question. Simple, gentle, are you okay? Haven't heard from you today. He replied an hour later, sorry, crazy meetings. Rain check tonight. I stared at the message. My fingers hovered above my phone. Then typed, are you with Amara? Seen. In a reply. The next morning, he showed up at my apartment. I didn't answer the door right away. Just stood there on the other side, listening to my heartbeat in my ears, willing myself to stay calm. But I opened it, and there he was, still beautiful, still familiar, but somehow not mine anymore. Can I come in? He asked softly. I stepped aside. He stood in the hallway, like a child about to confess to breaking something fragile. It wasn't supposed to happen, he said. But it did. He looked down. She came back last week. Out of nowhere. Said she made a mistake. Said she wanted to try again. I told her no at first. My chest tightened. But you changed your mind. He swallowed. She was my first everything, Liana. I spent years begging the universe for one more chance. And suddenly, there she was. It felt unfair. Like a cruel joke if I didn't see it through. And what was I? I asked. You were light. You saved me from drowning. You reminded me I was still human. I blinked hard. But I wasn't the person you wanted to swim to shore with. Silence. His silence was louder than any apology. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things or beg him to choose me. I simply walked to the bookshelf, pulled down the notebook where I used to write his progress notes, and dropped it into the trash. Get out, I whispered. Liana, you don't get to explain. You don't get closure. You already had yours, remember? With her. This right now? This is mine. He didn't move for a long time. Then he nodded once and left. I collapsed to the floor the moment the door clicked shut. Grief came in waves, anger. Then shame. Then devastation. How had I been so stupid? How had I let myself fall for someone who was still tied to a ghost? I wasn't just heartbroken. I felt erased. Like everything I had poured into him, every soft word, every midnight call, every quiet encouragement meant nothing. Like I had simply been the warm-up act before the headliner took the stage again. Days passed, then weeks. I resigned from the clinic, packed what I needed, left the city without saying goodbye. I deleted his number, blocked his email, shut down the version of myself that only existed to heal him. And for the first time in a long time, I started to choose me. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew I couldn't stay. Not in a city where every CAF reminded me of a smile that wasn't meant for me. Not in a neighborhood where ghosts whispered his name on every corner. I needed distance, space, silence, not the kind I once used to save others, but the kind that finally started saving me. The city I ran to didn't know my name. That was the point. I found a small town with quieter skies and people who didn't ask questions. I rented a tiny loft above an old bookstore owned by an elderly woman named June, who smelled like peppermint and always left warm tea by my door. In the evenings, you look like someone who forgot how to rest, she said on my first day there. I didn't reply, just smiled softly. I didn't want to talk. For once in my life, I just wanted to be. I stopped wearing mascara, stopped checking my phone for messages that would never come. I bought canvas and paint even though I had never painted before. I wrote in journals I never intended to show anyone. And little by little, I stopped checking the mirror for traces of the woman who used to wait for a man to choose her. Time passed in pages. I volunteered at the local community center, taught breathing classes to kids with anxiety, wrote blog posts under a pen name that slowly gathered attention. You write like you've bled on every word, one commenter wrote. I smiled. They had no idea how true that was. One day, while leaving the library, I heard a familiar voice. Liana Ray? I turned slowly, and there he was. Eli, my childhood friend, my high school what if, the boy who once painted my locker with watercolor hearts the day he found out I was moving away. I hadn't seen him in nearly a decade. He looked older, yes, but his eyes were still kind, still open in the way Kieran's never were. Eli, I blinked. I thought it was you. He laughed, scratching the back of his head. You used to braid your hair like that in 10th grade. I smiled, surprised by the warmth rushing into my chest. Still observant, still stubborn? He teased. Less than before, I think. We both laughed, and for the first time in months, it didn't feel forced. We started meeting for coffee. No pressure. No flirting. Just old stories and shared silence. Eli worked as a trauma counselor at a nearby school. He knew pain, but not the kind that tried to own you. His presence was calm, constant, kind. You look like someone who's been fighting to breathe for a long time, he said one afternoon. But now, you're finally coming up for air. That night, I cried. Not because I was broken anymore, but because I was healing. One evening, Eli found me painting in my loft. I had invited him up to return a book, but he stood in front of the half-finished canvas and tilted his head. You're painting the version of you that was never allowed to exist, he said quietly. I looked at him, startled. What do you mean? You gave so much of yourself to someone else, Liana. I think you forgot who you were without the saving. I swallowed. I think you're right. Can I help you remember? My voice was barely a whisper. Please, and so he did. With every walk by the lake, every book we read together, every shared joke, every still morning sipping tea. Eli never rushed me, never asked for anything. He saw me not as a therapist, or a healer, or someone broken to be fixed. He saw me as me, and in his eyes I started seeing her too. I was still scared of letting go, of opening the door again, of trusting that someone wouldn't walk through it just to leave. But Eli stayed, not with grand declarations, just steady love, the kind that doesn't need to be spoken to be known. The kind that waits at the edge of your soul until you're ready to let it in. And quietly, without warning or fanfare, I began to fall. The summer of that borrowed life ticked on. I started noticing patterns, triggers, moments when the world glitched slightly, like a flicker in the matrix. When Elias touched a particular melody on the piano, when I turned to glance at him just as he smiled, when we passed that old bookstore on Birch Avenue and he whispered, "It feels like we've been here before." I never told him I was from another reality. How could I? It sounded like madness, even to me. But sometimes, when he looked at me too long, I wondered if he somehow knew, if his heart remembered things his mind had never been told. We made memories like we were racing time. Late-night grocery runs for chocolate and cherries. Midnight rides to the beach. Board games that turned into debates. Debates that turned into kisses. I photographed everything. The curve of his cheek in morning light, the crinkle of his eyes when he laughed, the fog on his glasses after coffee. And then, one morning, I woke up. And he was gone. Not in the tragic, final sense. No, worse, he was there physically, but something in his eyes had changed. The warmth, the spark, the history. Gone. It was as if a switch had flipped and I was once again a stranger. Good morning, I greeted, trying to anchor us to yesterday. He nodded politely. Morning. Did you say your name was Mara? My heart sank so violently I thought I might faint. The universe had reset him, but not me. I remembered everything. He remembered nothing. I smiled, shaky. Yeah, Mara. He poured himself coffee, humming absently to a song on the radio, a tune he once told me reminded him of me. Now, it meant nothing. Over the next few days, I tried to trigger his memory. We went back to the bookstore. I played the melody on his piano. I took him to the beach, handed him the camera, asked him to take a picture of me. He tilted his head. Deja vu. Maybe you dreamed it, I said, though the weight in my chest felt like 1,000 realities crashing down. I sat by the window that night, watching the stars blur through my tears, and then I heard the voice. Not his, not mine, a soft whisper. In my head, borrowed time has rules. You remember what he forgets, and when you love deeper, the price is steeper. I wasn't just visiting another reality, I was rewriting a soul's destiny. Elias wasn't mine to keep. He belonged to the thread of time I was trespassing in, and slowly, he was being pulled back to his rightful path. I faced a cruel dilemma: continue loving him and watch him forget me again and again, or leave before my heart shattered beyond repair. But love isn't logical, so I stayed. The days that followed were like watching a beautiful painting fade in the rain. Elias remained kind, courteous, even sweet, but there was no weight in his gaze, no secret language in our silences. He'd smile when I made him laugh, but it wasn't the smile of someone who remembered why. It was the smile you give a stranger who holds a door open. And yet, I couldn't stop myself. I lingered. I tried new ways to reach him, cooked the meals we once shared, played our favorite movie at full volume, hoping it might echo into his subconscious. Sometimes, I thought I caught a flicker of something behind his eyes. A hesitation, a look, a half-remembered word, but like waves retreating from the shore, it always slipped away. The universe was pulling him back and pulling me forward. One night, I dreamed of the original timeline, my Elias, the one who had died in that accident. His hand reached for mine across some cosmic divide. He didn't speak. He just looked at me with sorrowful eyes, as if to say, "You have to let go. Even borrowed time runs out." When I woke, Elias was staring at me, puzzled. "Are you okay?" I nodded. "Just a dream." He tilted his head. "You said my name in your sleep." I froze. "What did I say?" "You whispered, 'Don't go, Elias,' like you were begging." He looked away then, uneasy, like some part of him understood the gravity of the words, but couldn't place why. "I feel like I know you," he said softly. "Is that crazy?" "No," I whispered. "Not crazy." For a second, the veil almost lifted. But then the moment passed. The next day, I went to the treehouse, the one we built in his backyard, where he once kissed me and whispered he'd love me in every version of the universe. It was still there. Still ours. Still untouched. I climbed inside, sat cross-legged on the dusty wood floor, and took a deep breath. And I made a choice. I would leave before the borrowed time shattered us both, but I wouldn't go without giving him something real, something that might one day echo. Even if he never remembered me. I left a letter, a confession of love across lifetimes, a message to the version of him who might someday find it and wonder why it made him cry. And as I walked away, I didn't look back. 3 years. That's how long it took for the silence to become peace. That's how long it took for me to rebuild myself without bitterness. And by the time I walked back into the city I once escaped, I wasn't the same woman who had cried in the hallway watching Kieran walk away. No, I was a woman reborn. My return wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some plotted revenge arc or a Hollywood-style power move. I was invited to speak at a global psychology summit. My blog had become a book. The book had become a bestseller. My words, my pain turned into prose, had touched millions. People wrote letters to me about healing from betrayal, about surviving emotional abandonment, about finding love that didn't ask them to bleed to be worthy. And I found purpose in that. The event was held in a glass tower downtown, not far from the clinic where Kieran and I once shared too many silences. I wore a pale blue suit. Clean, simple, empowered. My name was on the speaker list beside international luminaries. The girl who once believed her love had to fix someone to be worth keeping, now someone others listened to. I walked into the lobby, calm, unreadable, whole, and then I saw him. Kieran Hale. Older, a little more tired around the eyes, still heartbreakingly handsome, but no longer unreachable. Our eyes locked. He blinked as if unsure whether I was real. Liana, he said, a little too softly. I smiled, not out of affection, not out of cruelty, just a peaceful acknowledgement of the past. Hello, Kieran, you look. He paused. Incredible. I tilted my head. You look like someone who finally learned to sleep. He gave a weak smile. I read your book twice. Did you recognize yourself in it? Every page. And he looked down. I hated myself. Then I forgave myself. And then I cried. That surprised me. Why? I asked. Because the woman in that book, she loved me better than I ever deserved. I said nothing. You deserved more, he added. I know, I said simply. He walked beside me to the conference room. People nodded at me, shook my hand. Kieran stayed a few steps back, like a man watching a fire he once started but could no longer touch. Just before I went on stage, he leaned close and whispered, I'm glad you didn't stay the version of you I broke. I smiled. Me too. And then I stepped onto the stage. Later that evening, as the city lights came alive, I walked to a nearby CAF to meet someone. Eli. Still the same warm eyes. Still the same patient energy. He greeted me with a grin and a single flower. You crushed it up there, he said. I didn't even shake. Because you finally know who you are. I nodded. I saw him, I added. I figured. I didn't feel angry anymore. Just complete. Eli reached across the table, brushing his fingers against mine. You're not just complete, he said. You're ready. I took a deep breath. Yes, I am. And as he leaned in, not with urgency, but with reverence, I closed my eyes. This kiss wasn't desperate. It wasn't born from pain. It wasn't a rescue. It was home. Finally, weeks passed, the sky changed its colors, the wind shifted its breath. I returned to my timeline, my present. And for the first time in a long while, I accepted it for what it was. Fractured but mine. I didn't chase the past anymore. I honored it. I told no one about Elias. No one would believe it anyway. But I visited his grave often. Not the Elias of the alternate life, but mine, the one who died young, still brilliant, still full of dreams. I brought flowers. I whispered stories. I told him about the other him, the one who survived and became a man I could love again, even without memories. And then, one rainy afternoon, I returned to the treehouse. I don't know why. Maybe part of me hoped. Maybe I was just remembering. To my shock, someone had been there. The dust was cleared. The space swept. A small, framed drawing sat on the ledge, two silhouettes sitting under a star-filled sky. The caption beneath it said in soft pencil, "In another life, I think I loved you," and my heart stopped. He remembered something. Not everything, but enough. Enough for the soul to whisper what the mind could not scream. I left the treehouse in tears, half joy, half grief, all love, because we had touched eternity and returned. And even if he never knew me again in full, the imprint we left on each other would stretch across timelines, across streams. Love had not ended. It had only shifted shape. Outro. The final reflection. You may think love must follow rules, time, memory, logic. But sometimes love exists in borrowed time. In an alternate beat of the universe. In the half glance of a stranger who feels familiar. In the brush of a hand that sparks a DJ VU to reel to ignore. In a drawing left behind in a treehouse no one remembers building. Love doesn't need to be understood. It only needs to be felt. So if one day you meet someone who makes your soul stir, don't question it. Maybe, just maybe, they were yours once. In another life. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, stay happy.